You've seen it all before, nothing disturbs you, everything's predictable. Now it's my turn. I'm gonna shake you like a rag doll until you wake up from the fast food horror you've been fed. My name is Bleeding Critic. They call me the Banksy of horror, the underground critic, the horror vigilante. My interactive website, bleedingcritic.com, is where horror fans have a voice and new horror talent share their short films. To watch my spoiler-free horror film reviews, press play. If you've seen the film I'm talking about, add your own slide bar % rating. I create disturbing horror content. Click the tab and make your choice and download files immediately. Share your horror memories. Talk about a moment from any film, recent or old, that disturbed you, that's damaged you forever. Then send your clip to bleedingcritic@live.com. If you've made a short horror film and you'd like to be considered for it to be featured on my site with a special filmed introduction from me, send it to bleedingcritic@live.com. Right now you better subscribe to my website bleedingcritic.com and my YouTube channel, and remember, once I'm inside your skull, I ain't leaving. Matthew, I wanted to interview you because I'm impressed with your work as director and writer for your first feature film, Chatter, which I've video reviewed. Well done to you and everyone who worked on Chatter for the following achievements. Are you ready for my questions?
Yes, I'm ready. I'm really happy and honored to be here. And I just, first of all, want to say how much I appreciate how much that you do for the horror community in such a unique way. So, with that being said, while I'm a little scared, I am ready for your questions. So go ahead.
Kind words, I really appreciate that, Matthew. So don't worry, you're safe for now. Tell me about a moment, just a single moment from any horror film, old or new, that damaged you forever.
Wow. There's there's a lot to choose from. Um, the one I know you asked me this before one time, and I was talking about Poltergeist, and the scene with the guy eating the chicken and his face peeling off. Um, the one that really sticks out for me now is the bathtub scene in The Shining. Where we see like this long tracking shot. That's supposed to be Jack Nicholson's character, and he's going through this bedroom and into the bathroom. We see his hand open the door, and there's this naked woman in the bathtub, and so turn around and see his reaction, which is the same as my reaction, which is wow, naked woman in the bathtub. And then they get out, but something's not gonna go right because it's so like the shot's taking so long and there's so much tension building and they're moving in slow motion, and then they hug and they kiss, and he sees her in the mirror and she's now like decrepit with like sores and boils, and we reveal her face and she's this old hag, and it's like really creepy and disgusting, and it was hard to kiss people for a long time after that without, being afraid that when I opened my eyes, and actually, now that I think about it, yeah, there's always like this little bit of fear that, this is so great, it's so amazing, and what if I open my eyes and this person is, a demon?
I am a demon. That's a wonderful choice. I just love the way that scene from The Shining just takes its time. What was the last horror film you watched, Matthew, that was really disappointing, and why?
No, that's another tough question. I as a filmmaker, I hate to actually go there, because I know what it takes to make a movie and to, really want people to get it and to have a vision, and it doesn't always work out that way. If there was one, I would have to say, and there's actually two parts to this. So Insidious, which, the first 3/4 of that movie for me were like on the edge of my seat, terrifying, like just, one of the scariest scenes in recent history for me was in that movie. And that's the scene where, Rose Byrne is in bed and she's looking out the window and it's raining and we see this man, walking back and pacing back and forth on the porch, and we hear his boots, and he's wearing like this big black trench coat and, moving back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and all of a sudden he's in her bedroom pacing. And that was actually probably the first time that I felt full body chills from watching a movie. Now, that said, like I said, the first 3/4 of the movie was that suspenseful for me. But then, the last part of the movie with, I forget his name, the lead character, like going, the husband, he had to like go into the spirit world to find his son and get him back. I don't know, it just kind of didn't work for me, and I get that they were going for something. It was kind of like, I guess it was kind of like Poltergeist, where they have to like go in and get her, and this time they're showing it. But yeah, that kind of took me out of it, unfortunately, because I thought it was really a superb movie up until that point.
Yeah, that's a good example. I think you touched on something here, Matthew. It's like, I watched Jennifer Lynch's excellent film Chained, which I've video reviewed, and it's an exceptional piece of work. However, the last 15-20 minutes is like another director came on board, but because of the body of the work I've seen before the last 15 minutes was to a fantastic standard, I let it go. But it does seem to happen, and sometimes I wonder whether it's because the people behind the purse strings are panicking, or there's a lack of funds. But sometimes, the last half an hour or 20 minutes of a film is so crucial, and they just don't get it right sometimes. And Chained is my experience, which mirrors the same experience you've had with Insidious. Moving on now, I want to ask you a question about the casting for your film Chatter. How many actors and actresses did you consider to play the roles of Mr. and Mrs. Cole? And tell me about a moment when you decided to cast Serena Khan and Brady Smith.
Yeah, the casting. That's really interesting. the casting and how that all happened. One thing is, I worked in commercial casting for about 15 years, so I know a lot of actors in LA. And when I was looking to shoot Chatter, and I was racking my brains, like, who is the guy that could be likable and personable, that the audience is going to root for, that's going to show a range of emotion, Brady Smith was the actor that came to mind for that. And I've known Brady more than 15 years, since before casting, and that was when we used to deliver food together. We worked for this company we delivered like Burbank and Glendale, for people who know the Los Angeles County area. So we used to deliver food together. and then we would see each other on auditions, and he's done a ton of commercials. But what really stood out for me was I had seen his dramatic work and things that he had done in TV and film that were like really heavy and had a lot of depth and emotion. And so I knew that he was the guy that could pull it off, and I just needed to convince my producers of that. So I had him, video an audition, like actually like this is right now, with a webcam and everything. And so he sent me a video, and I sent it to them, and I was really like, no, this is the guy. And to his credit, him and Serena both get a lot of amazing feedback for their performance in Shatter. So that's awesome. Serena, I was working editing reels for actors, and she happened to be one of my clients, and I was editing her reel and watching her stuff, and she was really cool, very personable also, just a really great energetic person to be around. And I remember after she left, when I finished her reel, I was like, man, I gotta find a way to work with her. And so when Chatter came around, she was one of the actresses that I had auditioned for that role. And to her credit, little insider information, there was an actress that was originally going to play Laura, who had played her in the short film Anna, which I also had directed, and she wasn't available. She wasn't available to shoot Chatter, and so originally Serena was going to be the antagonist, Alex, and then so when this other person dropped out, I was like, what are we going to do? We're shooting in a week. We need to find an actress. And so Steve Jacobs, who's one of the producers, was like, well, what about Serena? I'm like, Serena's not British. She's got to be British. And Steve said she does accents really well. And so Serena sent me video of her playing Laura with an English accent, and I was like, damn, that sounds really good. And I had to run it by some British friends of mine who all bought it. And the funny thing was, on set, she stayed in character the whole time. So she was speaking in an accent the whole time. And when we finished shooting, she switched back to English, switched back to American, and everybody was like, what the fuck are you doing? That's weird. So it's pretty cool, just another testament to her ability.
That's a couple of great behind the scenes stories, so thanks for that. Yeah, Brady and Serena really bring your vision to life. Now, Matthew, inconsiderate behaviour in cinemas, snacking, texting, talking. Do you suffer from cinema rage like I do?
Yeah, inconsiderate behavior in movie theaters. I don't mind the snacking so much, just because for me, in a theater, that's just part of the experience. I mean, I grew up with popcorn and M&Ms and Red Vines, and they're not quiet food. Which maybe that's one of the reasons that movies are so loud, is because in between the trailers and the movie, when it's quiet, all you hear is the crackle stuff. So I don't mind that, but the texting, talking for sure bugs the hell out of me. And I have said things to people at times, and I've gotten like the ushers or people, I've walked out of theaters at times. It's I'm there to see a movie, and I'm there to be in the experience. And I can imagine, as a filmmaker, wanting people to see the movie and get the experience. Texting, I mean, look, we live in a world now where it's like I got my phone right here, while I'm doing this. And there's a time and a place, and sometimes, I'm a parent, so I need to keep an eye out in case, something with my kids. But for the most part, the talking thing bugs me, the texting, like dim the light or something, or be inconspicuous. That's what I would like to see happen. Just be respectful of people around you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just about people being considerate. And I think there are so many people that are simply not aware of their surroundings. Was Chatter a risky film to pitch? Because it's a brave idea to create a film that is just video conversations, and what were the major problems you experienced during pre-production?
Was Chatter risky to pitch? Wow. Well, it's interesting because the way that Chatter came about was, like I said, I shot a short film called Anna a few years before that, which was more of an experiment. And so the short was awesome, and I didn't really expect it to go any further. And then Steve Jacobs, who's one of the producers on Chatter, saw Anna and approached me and was like, "You should turn this into a feature. It's really current. It's different. It's cool. It's scary." And actually, I guess he kind of pitched it to me because I was like, "Well, how am I going to extend a 9-minute short with 2 people into a full-length feature?" And so we talked about it, and then as I started to write it and develop it and add in characters and different layers and scenarios and all of that, it started to work. And so then it became, meeting with like Aaron Harvey, who's one of the other producers, who brought on a lot of the crew. Pitching it to actors. Actually, the actors were fairly easy because they were like, "Oh, cool, experimental thing, get a chance to just play and try something new." There, hadn't really, this type of movie hadn't really been done before, so there wasn't a lot at stake. If it worked, awesome. If it didn't work, okay, well, we had fun trying. Of course, I don't really take things lightly, honestly, so I would always be like, "No, let's make it better, make it better, make it better." But it was kind of it just really came together very organically, and people were available for the shoot, like crew-wise, and actors were like up for jumping in on it, and nothing. There weren't any really major problems with pre-production. Although, the one thing was the concept. Because it was something that hadn't been done before, and I was very specific that I wanted it to look like Skype, with picture-in-picture, that sort of thing. So we have like the big window and the little window, and then at times it's split screen. And so, one of the first edits were, it was just like cuts back and forth without that look. And so for me, it was like, no, it's got to be that look. And if it's not that look, it's not going to work, because I want it to feel for the audience like we're in the Skype conversation also. So that was probably the one thing that was tricky, was really conveying how I wanted it to look, and through that how I wanted it to feel. But otherwise, it was just new territory, so people tended to be up for it.
Good, it certainly paid off. During the film's story creative process, sometimes the best suggestions can come from people not involved in the industry. Have you ever given a scenario to someone and their unexpected suggestion energized you to take your story onto another level?
There's one element in Chatter where some friends of mine who aren't in the industry had seen Anna, the short film. And they were saying how they had kind of lived that life, where one of them was in London and one of them was here in the States, and so they would actually fall asleep, with their Skype on, so that they could feel like they were with each other. And that was something that I hadn't had originally in, but when they mentioned that, I was like, wow, that would be really cool, just to have this whole thing where the Skype's on constantly, and then they're both asleep, but things are happening. So that's an element where, somebody who wasn't in the industry actually gave me an idea, and I took it and ran with it, and that's great, because at the end of the day, most of the people that are going to watch movies aren't in the industry, and so hearing what would be scary for them, or what would make something better for them, always helps, because then I can people not in the industry just see things differently. I think that we tend to be like, okay, well, how am I going to make that work, and how much is it going to cost? And And I don't know, for me, I kind of jumped to the, like, how's it going to work thing first a lot of times. So having somebody, throw out an idea that has no clue how anything works is always, it just gives you, just opens things up.
I think that's really good because it shows that you're open to suggestions and you're not stubborn and blinkered, so well done for that. Are you disheartened by the current film trailer trend to give away a plot? And did you actually have total control on the content for the trailer for Chatter?
I would say disheartened, and I do agree with you. In fact, there was some movie. I think it was, my girlfriend and I went and saw The Force Awakens a couple months ago, and there was some trailer at the beginning. I don't remember which movie it was, but I remember her turning to me and she goes, well, we don't have to see that movie now because we know what's going to happen. And so I think, I don't really care for it when the plot's given away, And speaking of The Force Awakens, I mean, what they did, I think, was brilliant. Now, granted, that's a huge scale movie in terms of, people really being invested in, the storyline and if it's going to be good and all of that. But, there was like 4 or 5 different trailers, and people were, it was vague what the storyline was going to be. It was vague about, who the characters were. And so there was all this talk about, well, who's this person? Who's that person? What do you think is going to happen? And there was intentional misdirection to where, I'm watching the movie and it's like, oh, that scene led me to believe this, but that's not what actually happened. And I think that's really cool, where look, trailers are called teasers, and they're supposed to tease you so that you want to see the movie. And so, that's my opinion of what a trailer should be. It shouldn't give the whole movie away. And as far as, me having control over Chatter's trailer, I edited it. So I'm the one who put that together, and there's hints of things in it, and I think it works well. The feedback I've gotten is that it works well. So yeah.
And you did a good job on it too, mate. And I agree with what you're saying. I remember one that stayed with me forever was the original trailer for Ridley Scott's Alien, where the egg hatches. That's one that comes to mind. And the other one, if you go on YouTube and tap in alternative trailer for The Exorcist, and you should come up with a black and white trailer that I believe they didn't show because it was deemed too disturbing, and that's got some wonderful imagery, so that stayed with me. But as you know, Matthew, it's all about the horror. So share with me 3 horror films that have influenced you and explain why.
Nightmare on Elm Street. Absolutely, Nightmare on Elm Street. I remember when that came out in the 80s. Now, I was pretty young. And that was before, like, the first one was before Freddy became like the wisecracking serial killer. So in the first one, you didn't really see him that well, and he was always this dark, ominous figure, like with these lanky, long arms, with the hat and the sweater and the burnt face, but you didn't get a really good look at him. And the thing that was really scary about that was, I remember, the first scene, or I think it was the first scene that you see him, and it's this long shot, and I think it was outside with floodlights. It was at night, and it was foggy, and you just see this figure with these long arms, and he's dragging, the knives with the sound and the scraping on the metal pipe, and it was just like freaky, and I still get, like, I'm getting chills right now, and so that was really scary. The other element of it was that movie made it not okay to go to sleep, because until that point, when I was scared as a child at night, I would just pull the covers over my head, and I knew that once I fell asleep, I'd be okay. But with Nightmare on Elm Street, it wasn't so safe to fall asleep. So definitely inspiring there, and just really scary. Another movie was 1408 with John Cusack. And the thing about that movie is, it's one man in this haunted hotel room and keeping it suspenseful and scary, and all this stuff's happening to him, and he's an amazing actor. So you're right there with him, with all this stuff that's going on, and it's just him in a room. And to be able to make that work is pretty incredible. And then the last one, the third one, might be a little controversial, because this movie, for some reason, has gotten controversial, for people who like it. I don't know why. But the Blair Witch Project. And, the thing about that is, it wasn't the first found footage movie, but it was the first big one. It was the one that changed or started this whole new movement in horror. Much like, if you look at music, like Nirvana wasn't the first grunge band, but when Smells Like Teen Spirit came out, it just upended everything. So with Blair Witch, here's this movie with these kids out in the woods that the whole marketing thing was, this is real. We were led to believe that they weren't actors, and they're in the forest, and you're watching this movie. I'm watching the movie as a horror fan, waiting for stuff to happen, and nothing's happening. And you think stuff's going to happen, and it's not. And they're terrified. And so there's all this tension building, and you're on the journey with them. And then the very last scene where you see the kid in the corner, with his back to the camera. Once I realized what that was, because they had mentioned that in a conversation earlier, and I remember walking home from the theater going, "Oh my god, that was fucked up." So to be able to do that and change the course of filmmaking to where low budget indie horror that's good and suspenseful, like Chatter, Chatter, may not have been made if it wasn't for Blair Witch. So definitely inspiring.
That's a good selection of films there, Matthew. I think out of those three you mentioned, for me, the best one would be the Blair Witch Project. Is there a horror film that you've seen that you would never, ever sit through again because it tattooed your soul?
Yes. The Exorcism of Emily Rose is a movie that I will never need to or want to sit through again. And so in The Exorcist, you see Linda Blair's head turned around, and there's all this stuff where her body is possessed and everything. And for me, The Exorcism of Emily Rose took that to a whole other level where you see her body contort and bend backwards, and her face, and it was really freaky. And the recordings, when you're listening to the recordings, and you hear like the demon voices and all that other stuff, and the clicking, and just on every level, that movie creeped me out. And I saw it at the same time that I was living in a haunted house in Silver Lake in California, Silver Lake Echo Park area in California. And so I had been talking to psychics, I had been talking to ghost hunters, I had been researching all this stuff. And so to see a movie about somebody who was possessed and having exorcisms and all of that stuff, where I was living in a house with spirits and things were happening, that freaked me out. So I don't need to go back there.
I understand.
I won't take you back there.
Now, the original foreign film Martyrs is an exceptional French-Canadian horror film that's been remade. Do you agree the companies that remake subtitle films are like parasites feeding off the hard work, creativity and talents of others?
Parasites. Well, first of all, I think my threshold for bullshit is higher than yours. So I wouldn't go so far as to call them parasites. And I do appreciate that you're just like, no bullshit, cut to the chase, say what's on your mind, and fuck everybody who doesn't agree. I will say, look, the Japanese Ring and the Grudge, I liked the American versions. I thought that the Grudge had some moments that were really scary for me, that made me had me on edge. I don't know. I think it's probably an American thing. We're very privileged here in the United States, and we're not as cultured, I would say. So if we were in some European country and there was some amazing cinema with subtitles, I mean, we would have grown up around that, and it would be normal. Whereas I think here in the States, we're kind of used to being pandered to, I guess, for lack of a better word, catered to. That's a better word. We're used to being catered to, and so I think it's just very easy to take a movie that's really incredible and just remake it in English with English actors and do an English version of it and then put it out there, and consumers will buy it. So I don't know what the compensation is, so I'm hoping that the originators of those movies like The Grudge and The Ring and got compensated because it was their idea. And if they don't, if somebody just steals it and remakes it, yeah, that's kind of fucked up. I don't know how that business model works, so I can't speak to that. I will say that I think real fans will seek out the best movies, and so at the end of the day, the consumers will decide. And I know that because it's easier and more accessible, to just go watch the English version, maybe that's what's gonna sell. But yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't call them parasites. I would reserve that for other areas in the entertainment industry.
Fair enough, mate. Perfect answer. I think you've hit the nail on the head with that one. I totally agree with you. There's no need for you to be scared. You're perfectly safe. I really enjoyed talking to you, mate. I think you're a top geezer. Now tell me, when did your respect for the horror genre start?
Yeah, my respect for the horror genre started when I was young. I grew up, my grandfather watched Twilight Zone and Star Trek. So I grew up watching Twilight Zone and Star Trek, in my early years. I loved Twilight Zone, and every year, Thanksgiving and I think 4th of July also, they would do a Twilight Zone marathon. So I would just sit all day and watch them. And I remember Tina was the first one that really creeped me out, and the talking doll that would kill people and all of that. So I grew up with that suspenseful thriller. You think one thing's going to happen, and then it's like an alternate reality. So I really loved that, and that was when I was young. And then in my teens was Friday the 13th, and that whole thing with the Friday the 13th and Halloween. But for some reason, Friday the 13th was more, that's what I spent a lot of my time watching with those movies. And then they got like super campy and slasher still. So yeah, that it started when I was young, and my cousins, we would watch horror movies all the time. Really, really great story. There was this movie, I think Adam Robitel was talking about it, Silent Night, Deadly Night. And so, my grandfather, Eastern European, Jewish, spoke Yiddish, was from Poland. We would go to the video store, and we'd get to pick out movies when we would have sleepovers at his house. And my cousins and I, we were all into horror movies. And so my cousin picked out Silent Night, Deadly Night, which was Santa Claus, I think with a chainsaw or something on the cover. And my grandfather looked at it and he's like, "Yeah, I don't want Christmas in my house." So, funny story. But yeah, I started young.
What are you doing telling me a funny story? No, but seriously, I did enjoy that, Matthew. Very heartwarming, my friend. It's a coincidence you mentioned Adam Robitel because I've also interviewed him. God, it's a small world, isn't it? Now, is there anything horror related that you're working on that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I do have a couple things in the works. There's a script that I'm co-writing called Sleep Study, which deals with the fear of dying in your sleep, and it takes place in a sleep study, and things happen. It sort of pays homage to Elm Street, I would say, and just again very suspenseful, that sort of thing. So working on that, we're in talks about doing a Chatter sequel. We're actually looking at developing that into a TV series. So all that stuff is in the works, which is great. And then Michael Kehoe and I are looking at ways that we can work together. We discovered each other at a film festival last year, and he's an amazing guy who's got great things going on, and he reached out to me, and so we're looking at ways that we can create some awesome movies together.
Well, that's a couple of interesting projects you have on the boil there, and I wish you luck with that. You mentioned Michael Kehoe. I introduced his short film Hush on my website, and Adam Robitel, who I've interviewed. This is a bleeding cool coincidence. Now, have you got any questions you'd like to ask me?
Yes, I do. I have some questions for you, sir. I'm actually really curious as to, are you all horror all the time, or late at night when the mask comes off, if it comes off, do you sit around and watch Woody Allen movies or something? I know you said in your review of Chatter that you don't do funny. I'm guessing you do funny, and I would just love to know what else besides horror, what other kinds of movies are you interested in?
You called me sir. I'll definitely extend your dead-by date for that disgusting display of respect. The mask is my face and it can't be removed. You're curious. Evil must remain a mystery. I am horror. Matthew, I would never waste my time watching films made by an 80-year-old man that left his girlfriend for her adopted daughter who's 35 years younger. It's just bleeding wrong, my son. However, I will tell you this since you've asked. Other films besides horror that have interested me, The Revenant is a beautiful and immersive experience that has stayed on my mind. I love Michael Mann's film Heat, and there's a film from 1991 with Saskia Reeves and Clive Owen called Close My Eyes. Once seen, never forgotten, and it's the music to that film that has never left me.
I'd also love to know what directions you see the genre going in. What direction would you like to see it going in, or what direction do you not want to see it going in? I'd love to just get your take on that.
I like that question. There's definitely a shift this year within the horror genre. Genuine horror fans have had enough of the Pepsi Light horror that they've had for years. They search online and find filmed and written work that makes horror exciting for them again. People are waking up and realising that the diluted horror that they're used to on television and in cinemas just doesn't challenge them or make them uncomfortable. The amount of creatives releasing fresh horror work online is giving us all so much choice, to the point the new blood will just drown out the noise of the repetitive garbage. New energy is taking over now. People like you, Matthew, creating original work, being loyal to those that you've known for years and listening to your gut instinct. You are now part of the huge horror community, and like Adam Robitel and Michael Kehoe, I've noticed you three actually embrace social media. This is how it's got to be. Online choice and interaction is the horror alternative, and I'm bleeding proud to do my bit by giving horror fans a place to be seen and their voices heard, and horror talent to show their work on my website, all for free. We are all in this horror community together, Matthew, and it's time to end that old-fashioned them and us gap between fans and horror creatives. The horror genre is about getting involved, being supportive, and we as creatives must continue to raise the level of the genre and give it power. Matthew, thanks for your time, and I wish you all the bleeding best for your future.
And just before I go, I just wanted to say thank you again. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you, and just thank you for what you do for horror and indie film, and just for the voice that you are in the world for what us filmmakers do. So thank you. And thank you to all the horror fans and everybody who's watching this. And I hope you all get a chance to see Chatter.
I'm Bleeding Critic,